Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. It's been way too long since we've had Robin Fuller in the studio with us today. And through the years, she's just quite the servant out there. She's a professional certified coach, the founder of Bloom Coaching. We'll talk about that. Helping ministry leaders to find confidence, lead with joy, finish well. That's good. Previously to that, for many, many years, she was the executive director there at the Pregnancy Care Center in Grants Pass. Been what? How long?
7 years since I've been gone.
7 years? Seemed like yesterday.
Yeah, I know. And neither one of us look any older.
No, of course not. No, we won't go there. Good to see you. How are you?
It's good to see you too.
Well, good. So tell us about Bloom Counseling. How did you get led into this?
Well, many years ago, when I was the leader of that pregnancy center, I was facing a huge burnout and was ready to quit. And I called a fellow pregnancy center leader, and she said, no, don't quit. You need to call Don. And I was like, who's Don? And Don was a leadership coach. He saved me, and I stayed working for many more years. And when Don was unable to do ministry, I heard God whispering, you could do this. So then I learned to become a coach. And the way to describe a coach, it's very different from counseling, because a coach really offers that accountability, asks questions, invites God into the process, because I don't know what you need, but we know the one who does.
Right.
So together we seek God to find out, what do you need? Are you facing a burnout? Are you heading towards succession? Are you dealing with conflict on your team? There's different things that I learned over the years, and now I'm able to help other ministry leaders like I was helped. It's like you always say, whatever you've been through, God will lead you to, or however you say that.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Are you primarily focused on pregnancy care center workers and employees?
I didn't set out planning to become a coach to do that, but that is my primary client. Last year I served, from what I can count, about 450 pregnancy center leaders around the country.
Really? So that does underscore what I say. Whatever God saves you from, brings you through, turns around, makes you a minister too. So it's a combination of the two.
Yeah, it really is.
So what's the number one emotion? Burnout?
I would say burnout is probably one of the greatest things that I deal with. And I found I'm pretty good at crisis management. So many of my clients come to me in crisis. They're tired, they're done, they're burned out. They're ready to quit, and after working together for a season, they're ready to go on, and then they can start to see over the horizon and maybe deal with some of the other things.
So what's your first attack? What do you do? Get them to step back a little bit, or what?
Breathe.
Breathe.
Well, seriously, and I remember the very first question my coach, Don, asked me. He said, how many hours a week are you working? And I said, 40. And he said, okay, that's great. You go to the grocery store and you see a donor and they ask you questions. Are you working? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, and then you are sitting at home and you open your laptop and next thing you know, you're in your emails. Are you working? And then you're laying awake at night and you're stewing. And so then he said, let me ask you again, how many hours a week are you working? And I said, probably 70 to 80. And he said, well, do you want to continue doing that? And then we started working on ways to set those proper boundaries, and I had that accountability from him, so I knew how desperately I wanted change.
All right, so looking back, where did that happen when you were still at the Pregnancy Care Center? Because you went on for a few more years before you transitioned out.
Yeah,
so you went from burnout to succession.
Well, I went from burnout, and then I was there for a while, and then worked for about 4 years on succession with my board.
Good. How'd that go?
It went really well. I'm actually in the process of writing a book on succession planning, because there aren't a lot of books out there for smaller to mid-size nonprofits, and there are some differences with a pregnancy center than a Christian business.
Why is nonprofit leadership so lonely?
Well, the way that I describe it as a coach, when you're dealing with something work-related and you can't really go to your board because they're your boss, and you shouldn't be going to someone on your staff because you're their boss, and you shouldn't be burdening family and friends who really don't understand who are you talking with. And that's where the value of a coach comes in, because I know with the pregnancy center leaders I work with, not many people know or understand all the various things they're dealing with. So it is just lonely.
How do you separate that when you're coaching somebody?
Well, part of it, having a coach makes it feel not so lonely.
Okay.
That's kind of the first thing. Having someone's perspective on the outside of what you're immersed in is very helpful. And then I'm also doing a lot of different group type work now. So one group that I do that is every month has 15 executive directors in it.
Wow.
And I lead it over Zoom, and they're not alone anymore. Yesterday, that's what they all said. They said, it's so good to know I'm not alone. So offering things like that is helpful.
I would assume that as you take on a leader within an organization and you're coaching them through these different seasons and emotions, that you also get a sense of the health of the organization.
Well, one of the reasons I primarily work just with the leader, because if you have a strong leader, you're going to have a stronger organization and you're going to make a greater impact. Your mission is going to do more. You're going to save more lives. So that's why I work primarily with that leader.
How do you handle, because I think one of the things that that can really grind on people is the back talk, maybe call it gossip or something like that, but the back talk within an organization of the leader, and all of a sudden they sense it's going on. How do you coach them through that?
Sometimes too late. Well, I did just release a course on my website called Courageous Conflict. Conflict is something that is within every ministry, and it's often not dealt with well.
Right.
Partly because of our own fears. We don't know how to deal with conflict. We don't want to deal with conflict. Confrontation feels mean, all of those different things. So we just don't handle conflict. And gossip and back talk, that bad talk that Ephesians talks about, is one of the worst things that contributes to conflict. I would even do a training against gossip in my pregnancy center, trying to encourage everyone to shut down that gossip or the grumbling and complaining or that bad talk. Because when someone starts grumbling and complaining against the leader, instead of just going to the leader with their concerns, it's just going to cause more issues.
Okay, so I guess the other part of that question would be, I don't think any of us handle conflict well. Is there a right way to handle it?
Well, the best thing is, as soon as you have that niggling feeling that something's going on, is have the conversation. Hey, Perry, I noticed that you said something earlier. It's kind of bugging me. I just want to follow up with you and see if I heard you right. We don't do that.
Yeah.
Instead, we avoid it. Then the enemy comes in. The voices start whispering in our ear about all the things that's going on, and then we avoid it. Like, even in my center, I was just too nice. I had people, I needed them to do a job, and if they weren't doing the job, I was just nice to them and let them linger, sometimes for years. And that ended up not being a good thing, and eventually the conflict just got bigger and greater. So the key to conflict is to handle it quickly, okay, and to handle it, hit it head on, and you have to identify what are your own fears about conflict and why are you not able to deal with it?
Let me just pause here and say to our viewers and listeners, if you're in any form of leadership and we're kind of knocking on your door with this conversation or ringing a bell, Robin's website is robinfuller.coach. There's a picture of the landing page. Of course, she heads up what she's calling Bloom Coaching, but you can go to robinfuller.coach and that'll pop up. And maybe just reach out to her, you know, helping you find your way through this. Because I think what I've experienced, you know, and I'm not being overly transparent here, is that people just don't understand.
People just don't understand. Well, you have so many different things, too. We're all different personalities. Mm-hmm. Some are introverts, some are extroverts, some are the ones who will dive into conflict and make it worse. Mm-hmm. Everybody's just so different. So understanding yourself is the first part of the course in Courageous Conflict, is understanding yourself and how you deal with conflict and why.
Okay. Have you in your coaching ever coached somebody say, all right, the season's over, you just don't see it?
Yes. Well, I have. And usually, once I get to know my clients, I can be much more forthright. I can be much more open and honest. And I can confront them a little harder. It's like, hey, wait a minute. 2 months ago, you said this.
Yeah.
Now we're back to this again?
Yeah.
How long are you going to do this? What is so sad in the pregnancy center movement, as with many ministries, the poverty mindset is so great. Poverty mindset.
Explain that one.
Well, it basically, so these executive directors who are now aging out have been paid so little, and they have no retirement, that they can't retire because they can't afford to retire, so they just hang on. Sometimes for a really long time, because many pregnancy centers pay their directors peanuts. I never had retirement, and my center paid me pretty well.
Yeah. That's a interesting.
That's a whole nother conversation we could have.
Do you find relationships with boards being a critical part of this problem?
Oh, my word, yes. I even have done board trainings before. The conflict course that I did is also, I recommend that boards watch it as well, because they lend to the conflict, sometimes not even knowing it, especially if there isn't a good relationship with the executive director, or if the boards are behaving badly and going around the executive director and having conversations with that staff member they go to church with, and they're talking about things they shouldn't. So the bad talk and gossip and grumbling and complaining also applies to the board of directors.
That's critical, isn't it? I mean,
it's
that's
so
huge.
critical.
Because the other part of it is, I wonder sometimes our boards. I want to say this carefully, because you obviously got so much going on here. But are boards properly selected? I mean, are they there out of position and recognition, or are they there out of passion for what the ministry does?
Well, I got to where our organization changed our whole process. No longer would we say, "Hey, Perry, would you come onto our board?"
Yeah.
We changed to, "Hey, Perry, would you prayerfully consider coming to visit a board meeting to see if God might be calling you to help? And if you like that first board meeting, you're required to come to 2 more meetings before we all prayerfully determine if you're supposed to be here, and then we can vote you in." That kind of a vetting process gave us board members who were in, and they were engaged, and they wanted to participate.
Yeah, I have coached that same thing. That's very, very wise. And I tell you, I went one step further.
Oh?
I made the vetting team vet the spouse.
That's also very wise.
Because it's a commitment.
Yeah. We also would always require a spiritual reference, a pastor or a home group leader who could speak to their godly character. And that was for all of our staff and volunteers at board.
So you're being called to up the health of an organization.
Yes.
And that's got to be, it's frustrating, but yet very, very fulfilling. Have you done work outside of pregnancy centers a little bit?
I do work with other ministry leaders as well. I primarily work with leaders not in this local area, usually around the country, either over Zoom, or over the phone.
Yeah.
But it's a joy to watch leaders find that confidence and joy and be able to finish well. I've worked with many, I don't even know how many executive directors or CEOs that have successfully finished well.
Is there a common problem with you finding everything?
Conflict.
Okay. All right.
Conflict
so
and burnout.
So you changed it to courageous conflict.
Courageous conflict. Have the courage to deal with the conflict when it arises, and to deal with those lingering things that you need to.
Well,
it's part of succession, because you can't leave a mess for your successor.
You're wonderful. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out the website, robinfuller.coach. And that's also the website for Bloom Coaching. There's a picture of the landing page.
Yeah, I'd love to help anyone who God might be tapping on the shoulder.
Give her a call. Make that first call. That can be very confidential, very private, very transparent, and begin the conversation that will help you a lot. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for so good to be here.
Thanks for letting yourself be recycled.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what happened.
I'm not done yet.
Good to see you. God.
You too. Thank you, Perry.